Now, the topic tonight is very tasty and murky, but we must do it anyway. Now, certain aspects of Christianity initially encouraged a sense of passivity among the Africans as the religion held high the virtues of forgiveness, submissiveness, and patience. Humiliation and suffering, such as were being endured by Africans during colonialism, were thought to be honoring and spiritually cleansing. The relationship between the missions and the colonial governments became symbiotic. Now, a writer called Kapoya alludes to the rather convenient aspects of Christianity that would encourage Africans not to worry about the insurmountable suffering and humiliation placed upon them by the colonial powers, that these aspects of life were actually beneficial to their standing in the eyes of God. Christianity played an important role in the colonization, not necessarily of the African continent, but rather the hearts and minds of Africans, whose potential for revolt was seen as an obstacle to the imperial takeover of land and resources. Now, I am joined by Professor Isaac Mwangi, and in what may seem like a long history class, but with modern implications to the state of Christianity today. I will allow him to do his introductions before we get into the conversation. Thank you, Sana Prof, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Tracy. I teach communication at the United States International University, and also edit a publication called The Oracle. Yes. That comes out weekly. Yeah. Basically editorial regarding matters of spirituality in society, issues to do with our day-to-day lives in society, politics, and so on, and how they impact on the spiritual realm.
Now, Prof,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Professor Mwangi is not new to this set. And of course, if you get to interact with the Oracle, his weekly editorial, you'll get to experience some of his work. Now, this conversation is imminent. It's necessary because King Charles visited Kenya and the wounds of colonization cropped up. 60 years later, it seems like we are not yet healed. In our minds and our hearts, there's still so much pain and so much worry. There's so much, the wounds of colonization are real even today. So, Prof, before we get into the conversation, I want to ask maybe, what is your take of the king visiting Kenya?
I think the visit mainly served to show that the British are still very interested in their former colony. They have a lot of interest in Kenya. You can say that in Africa, probably Kenya ranks high up there as far as British interests are concerned. We still have a large population of British, former British citizens in Laikipia and other places. They still own enormous tracts of land. Britain is one of the so-called development partners that is very keen and has a lot of interest, economic interest in Kenya, in all sectors, be it tourism, be it conservation especially, and mining interests. So Britain has a very keen interest and even maintains a military base in Kenya. So I would see that as an extension of the colonial stranglehold on Kenya.
Now, because your weekly editorial focuses on spirituality and how to interpret it in the modern society, why was colonialism and Christianity so intertwined that there seems to be one led to the other? How did that come to be?
Basically, what happened is that Europe needed resources from around the world, from India, from the Americas. They also had issues of population pressure. And of course, there was the industrialization that came in, and they needed the labor also for that, and material resources. And so for various reasons, economic reasons, Britain went around conquering the world, creating an empire for itself, as did other European countries as well. And we all know about the scramble for Africa and the partition at the Berlin Conference of 1884-85.
Yes.
Now, we can say that religion was used mainly as an excuse. It was the real reasons were economic, but they wanted to soften issues by purporting that or communicating to their own publics that they were not coming to exploit Africa, but they were coming here on a civilizing mission, on an evangelistic mission, that there were good reasons why they were coming. Of course, we know those were secondary. The key reason was economic. They were interested in resources. And so Christianity served to soften matters for the European colonizers. And also because the missionaries came about to establish schools, hospitals, and so on. That, of course, was a plus, and it served to soften people and to make them, to make it easier for them to be exploited and to be conquered. So Christianity played a key role and went hand in hand with European colonization.
Prof, this is a hard-hitting answer. You're saying it was intentionally deployed as a tool of colonization.
Yes, it was deliberate. Christianity went hand in hand with colonization, and we see it everywhere that religion is always used to support oppression. Of course, there's nothing good about colonization. I've seen arguments of late, even from a reputable TV station, I believe it was Sky News, that there was a good side of colonization, that they even gave us English, as though we didn't have our own languages. There is nothing good about exploitation, imperialism, slavery, colonization. All these are negative. Right now, we see what is happening in the Middle East. The occupation of the Palestinians that has been going on for so many years. They are killing, they are maiming, and basically collective punishment of the whole of the Gaza Strip. There can be nothing good about occupation and about colonization, because what is happening even in the Middle East today is colonization. And we went through the same thing. And we know that nothing good can come out of it. Even if there may be things that we can say we have gained in one or two areas, they do not justify in any way the cruelty and the trauma that we went through.
Now, I just want to pick that up and talk about Africa Renaissance. There's been a wave of Africans wanting to identify with their story, identifying with their roots. And we had famous singers like Lucky Dube and Bob Marley singing about coming back home. And I just want to read something, a small excerpt. It said, "Colonialism is a form of imperialism based on a divine mandate and designed to bring liberation, spiritual, cultural, economic, and political by sharing the blessings of the Christ-inspired civilization of the West with the people suffering under satanic oppression, ignorance, and disease." And when you mentioned that this particular news channel said that we gained something from colonization that is English, I'm bound to think about the attitudes of traditional belief systems today, the attitudes towards our traditional language, in how we dress, how we procreate and take care of our families. So I just want to pick your mind on Africa Renaissance. If we were to go back to identifying to our origins and identity as Africans, would we be risking and undermining progress or risking rewriting history? And what would that look like?
Let us say that for people to be free, they must first begin with their own minds. Freedom begins with the mind. And therefore, a true African Renaissance must seek to find out where do we stand in all this. Of course, we have come very far from our traditional African society.
Yes.
There are things we don't necessarily have to go back to, because we are facing different challenges. We have a different environment, local and international. We have to adjust to the challenges that we are facing in the world today. Therefore, we cannot go back wholly, say we're going back to wife inheritance and what have you in the era of AIDS. We have to adjust according to our own environment and circumstances. However, let me also say that, as I was saying, the mind is where we need to focus on, because colonization left a lot of trauma on Africans, which we are yet to recover from. For one, we lost our self-esteem. We became people who hate themselves. We see this continuation of this everywhere we go. That even if you enter a hotel and you sit down and then a white man walks in and sits down, you know who is likely to be served first. Because of that mental condition that we have become accustomed to through colonization and through religion, where we see that we are taught up to this day, many churches, depictions of God are depictions of an old white man. We know God does not have color. God is not white. God is not black. God is not brown. And any people can actually depict God as one of them. But Africans do not depict God as one of them. They depict God as white. Therefore, you have issues such as those. You have also issues of the violence in our midst. There's a lot of violence in Africa arising from colonization, and that violence can be seen even in religion itself. That's why when you talk to people, say, about what is happening in the Middle East, a lot of misinformed people will say, no, we stand by Israel and what have you, that is their land, let them hit at the Arabs and so on, as though Arabs are not human, as though we still have a chosen people of God in the new covenant, where there is neither Jew nor Gentile. And so that kind of traumatic experience arising from colonialism, arising from false teachings of religion, based focused mostly on the Old Testament without looking at the New, it creates a certain mindset whereby we see that our people are still having that trauma, and we need to get them out of that.
Now, Prof, you started touching on this, how we see colonization playing out today in the minds and hearts of Africans, because that is what we have left now. The colonizers are no longer here with us, but our minds and hearts still remember them so dearly. I remember when you're talking to some Kenyans in town, and you'd hear how the pain seemed so palatable, almost you can touch it. And thinking about this, we have the new colonialism, which is taking different faces. And right now we have this black supremacy. Previously, we had white supremacy and depictions of God and Jesus as a white person. But now we are also seeing the black people also trying to come up with their own form of God and their own form of Jesus. And the black race has now been put as superior. Maybe let me pick your brain on that.
Right. I think that kind of is sort of a reaction to centuries of oppression and people being forced to see the white man as superior. And so there's kind of a backlash that the black people are reacting in that manner. However, we can say that when you look at globally, you will see that racism is still very much alive. Racism is not just about showing God as white and so on. That is just something to try and control people's minds. However, racism is about power. Where does the power lie? How is it possible that when one country goes to destroy another, in one situation, justification is given, or they had weapons of mass destruction and, those kind of things. And even if none of them are found, nobody is taken to account or to the ICC. But in another case, you find that a conflict or any small attack is, seen as in very negative terms. Not that there's any attack or violence that is good, but there are double standards internationally, and those double standards tend to lead us to what we know as white privilege. So white privilege is still very much alive and kicking. And I would say that we need to do a lot more to lift up the consciences of people and their consciousness to enable our own people to be proud of themselves as Black people, to regain their confidence that they can attend international conferences and argue without feeling any sense of inferiority, that they can make decisions that are best for their own families and for their countries without having to feel that you need your hair to look like Zungu and buy some hair from wherever to put on your head and so on. All those are signs of mind control, which we first need to get rid of before we can talk of moving to the next stage of liberation.
I'd argue the point on white privilege, because right now we're looking at the scales being balanced. We have maybe white privilege is experienced more in Africa. Maybe if you can, I don't know if you agree with me, but when you're looking at the West and in America, Black people are getting more privilege right now with scholarships and those who can, it's called diversity, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're seeing more white people are being removed or are not being considered in some of these things. But away from that, I want to look at in what ways do we see colonization in modern Christianity today? There's a piece you wrote today that I really loved. It was about tricksters in the church. Maybe tell us what it was all about, and then we can answer the question on that as well.
Oh, that's the current oracle on tricksters?
Yes.
Yes, that was essentially about pastors or religious leaders who try to take advantage of the ignorance of people to make money from them, purporting that they ought to give them money. And you find, one of them has been in the news of late from Nano Evangelism. Pastor Nganga has been in the news, Apostle Nganga. Complaining about people giving 500 shillings and they have a litany of prayers, a long list of prayer, complaining about, there are very few notes of 500 and 1,000 shillings. I think that is a sense of entitlement that should not exist. Paul worked for his own livelihood, for his own income in the New Testament. All believers are equal. Everyone should look out for the other, esteem others better than yourself, the scriptures say. So nobody should have that kind of sense of entitlement. There is no love in entitlement. And that is what I stand out against.
Could this be a seed of how religion was depicted during the colonial era, with what we're seeing with our pastors today?
Yes, exactly, because religion came and what we got was not the proper scriptural form of spirituality. What we got was religion that had left the Middle East and been filtered through Europe. And when it reached Europe, Europe infused their own pagan gods and pagan forms of worship into Christianity, and then brought that polluted form of Christianity into Africa, whereby we sort of look at the Roman Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, and so on as our role models, which should not be the case, because we should just look at scripture. If today I was to open a Kikuyu church, I would be attacked. But we are very proud of talking about Roman Catholic Church, which the word Roman refers to an ethnicity. We are proud of talking about the Anglican Church, which refers to ethnicity. If we don't want, if we know that there is neither Jew nor Gentile in the church, then we should not encourage all those things. But you see now, those are things that were brought to us, and they brought us also things like white weddings, as though a pastor has any role in bringing two people together. It's God who joins. and that is done by agreement of the families concerned. It has nothing to do with the church. When Jesus went to a wedding ceremony, it was to celebrate, not to officiate and join them up together. The apostles never did such things. But we see what we have with us is a corruption of the church, and that corruption is in very many areas that we cannot even delve into all of them.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think that one you've scratched a bone there, and that's the point I was bringing on the attitudes of some traditional belief systems, traditional values, like how when you have traditional weddings, it's not a wedding until you do a white wedding. And I was thinking also about the Christian today, and maybe what are the signs of a colonized mind in a Christian today? Maybe, I don't know if you can take us through that.
Yes. Yes, the signs of a colonized mind, you'd find that such a person would, of course, consider that they have to attend a church service on Sunday. They do not, they have to be under a religious leader. They have to have that hierarchical kind of authority, so they don't consider themselves equals, but consider others to be above them or below them. Such a colonized mind does not think of their own tradition and their own language as important, but they think of the colonizer's language, that you have to communicate through the colonizer's language. You have to consider weddings and of the colonizer and their rings instead of your own systems. So I think those are some of the pointers, even in terms of dress, that you must be in a suit and tie when you are going to the church and what have you. Those are irrelevant things that result from a colonized mind.
So
and it goes even up to the international realm, as I was saying, whereby you consider that Israel are chosen people and like the rest of us are not chosen.
So which way forward, Prof? Because we're still, this is a Christian segment, we're both Christians. Which way forward, and how do we how do we then see ourselves in the light that Christ wanted us to see ourselves?
The issue is basically to have enlightened people who pass the word, like I do through the Oracle and through a program like this one, so that if we have more voices of people who go out to liberate people's minds, then that will, over time, have a great impact in releasing people from religion and bondage, whereby people have to think that, oh, I must give God money. God does not eat. God does not need money. Money is for helping the poor, the needy, helping the widows and the orphans. Yeah. It's not for God, and neither is it for exalting a fellow human being who should live very well while the rest of you suffer. A proper Christian community takes care of all its members. And so it's for us now to create proper holistic teaching, and there are many churches that are doing that. I've seen a lot of churches, for example, teaching against issues like tithing, and telling people just give freely from your heart, don't feel bound. And that is a proper way of doing it, that we don't give according to the Old Testament laws, but we are free in Christ. And that freedom needs to be extended to more and more areas, liberating people and making them truly free.
Prof, now before we finish, I know talking about our Christianity and the origins of it could be causing a lot of pain and some confusion, and even raising questions like this and having conversations like this could be seen as a taboo, and it could be seen as going against the crop. So how do you advise Christians in tackling such kinds of sensitive conversations as we wrap up?
Yes, I would say that our final authority is the Bible. And I would ask Christians to be like the Bereans, study the scriptures thoroughly. Get to know the principles by which you should interpret your Bible. For instance, a very simple one that many people ignore is that the New Testament reinterprets the Old Testament. You cannot just pick verses from the Old Testament and throw them at Christians and tell them to obey. You must look at everything in the light of the coming of Christ. What did it mean for those Old Testament scriptures? So by looking at things in that kind of manner, then you create awareness, you make people free, and that finally will lead to a better interpretation and better practice of Christianity.
Well, I can't believe we are done with time. I wish we could talk more and more. Prof, it's always a pleasure to have you. With your wealth of knowledge, I'm always leaving the set feeling refreshed. And one of the key pointers that I'm picking tonight is you said, for people to be free, it starts with the mind.